set those rates on Wednesday. The financial services group CME Group puts the odds of interest rates being lowered at 88% this morning. Kelly?
The Biden administration created the worst inflation in 50 years, and maybe for working Americans, the worst inflation of all time. And we have pulled that number down.
At the same time, though, you have polling, the most recent from the CBS YouGov poll, finding just 36% approve of the president's handling of the economy. That's down from 51% in early March. So clearly there's a disconnect here. What needs to happen between now and the midterms for Republicans to win on this issue? Do you believe it's possible?
Yeah, so I'd put an emphasis on that word, what needs to happen, which is a little different than what you need to say. Now, saying it's affordability hoax is terrible. It's awful. It's not going to work. Saying we inherited this crisis and we're trying to fix it, we're making some progress, that makes more sense to say. But at the end of the day, as we learned in the Biden years, it doesn't matter what you say about prices. It matters what people feel. And even though the inflation rate is down, prices are still up. When inflation goes down, that doesn't mean prices decline. That would take deflation, which would be another problem. So I think these nominal prices are the main thing driving the discontent on the economy, because even if inflation is 3% rather than 8%, everything's still more expensive, and people feel that. And this is a signature issue. For him to be at 36%, whatever it is, on the economy is a real flashing red light for the White House.
Right. So how will Americans feel any different in just these few weeks we have leading up to the midterms? So just weeks ago in a column, you warned that the president's tariffs, they're not helping manufacturing jobs specifically. The president last night defended the tariffs, and we have a bit of what he said here.
We're making so much money with tariffs that we'll also be able to make a nice dividend to middle-income people. We're talking about middle-income and lower-income people. We're not talking about dividends to rich people.
So will these tariffs lead to dividend checks for middle to lower-income Americans? And perhaps more importantly, do you think that will move the needle on the perception here of his handling on the economy?
Might help. I don't think it makes a lot of policy sense, because you're just taking money from people and then cutting them checks to give it back to them to kind of make them feel better. And the problem with tariffs, if they're raising revenue, someone's paying that. And the administration's theory is foreign countries or companies that are eating the tariffs, as they say. But that's not true. At least to some extent, they're filtering through to consumers, or the White House wouldn't have lifted the tariffs on about 100 or more coffee and other things that were more expensive because of the tariffs. So I don't think this is helping. And their theory, how it's going to ultimately work, you get more manufacturing in the United States. If that's true, that's still a long-term process where you feel the price increases now. And finally, usually when you're an incumbent president of the United States first year, you can blame the other guy because none of your policies have taken effect yet because of how he's done the tariffs. These were instantaneously, in effect, Trump saying, I control the economy.
Right. I want to get to the latest. NewsNation Decision Desk HQ came out with some new numbers, an average that shows the president's approval rating just under 43%, disapproval now at more than 53%. So when we widen the scope here, how much of a concern are those numbers for the party as we, again, look forward to the midterms here?
They're a big concern. That's a losing the House kind of number. Maybe it's not a Democratic tsunami kind of number, but that's the president's approval rating is what really drives midterm elections. And it's almost always the case, with few exceptions. Biden did okay in his midterms. George W. Bush did really well in his midterms, but that was after September 11th. But usually you're the incumbent president, you're going to have a bad midterm, and everything points that way.
Well, this economic campaign will be interesting to witness, and we'll see what action items follow as well. Rich Lowry, great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
The president is calling out the Democratic congressman he recently pardoned. Representative Henry Cuellar just filed to run again in Texas as a Democrat. The president slammed him for, quote, a lack of loyalty. Now, it suggests he expected Cuellar to switch parties after the pardon, which would have boosted the GOP seats in the midterms. The Texas congressman never made any public into taking bribes from companies based in Azerbaijan and in Mexico.
From day one, he has said, we're concentrating on public safety threats and national security threats. He was put in the Oval Office to run the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen. That's exactly what we're doing. That's what American people voted for.
So there, White House border czar Tom Homan defending immigration raids as some big city mayors are now stepping up restrictions on Border Patrol carrying out their work. The mayor of Minneapolis signing an executive order banning ICE officers from using city-owned parking lots, ramps, garages, vacant lots. And it comes during controversy over the arrest of Somali immigrants in the state. Last month, the president said he was ending the protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. Joining us now, West Virginia Republican State Senator Tom Willis, active duty National Guardsman, Special Forces Green Beret, and attorney. He's also running for U.S. Senate. Well, it is wonderful to have you this morning, and I'm curious on your take here because you're ultra qualified to answer this. How far can these mayors push their authority in these areas? And are those recent moves in Minneapolis, in fact, legal?
Well, it's good to see you this morning, Kelly. Thanks so much for having me on. You know, it's amazing to me how insistent the left and the Democrats are on pursuing policies of lawlessness. You know, it just really highlights the divide between the current Republican Party, which is a party of law, it's a party of order, it's a party of public safety. And on the other hand, you have the Democrat Party, which is a party of lawlessness, disorder, and lack of public safety in unsafe cities. So it's disappointing to see. And unfortunately, now you have a conflict between the federal government, which is pursuing law and order under President Trump, and rightly so, and Republican governors who want to see safety for their citizens in their states and law and order in their cities. And then you have Democrat or blue city mayors that are resisting the enforcement of law and the national immigration policies. So legally, the Democrat mayors run the risk of obstructing federal law. That could trigger a clause under the Insurrection Act, which gives the president the authority to use federal troops to enforce the laws in those cities. We've seen this before when schools were integrating in the South and the federal government used troops. So whenever there's an obstruction of federal laws in a jurisdiction, that could potentially trigger the Insurrection Act, which is a legal mechanism by which the president can use federal troops.
And Homan's talked about that in the past as well. He was also warning that ICE agents have been shot at. They continue to face threats. So in the wake of this news coming out of Minnesota, local leaders, they're pushing back against this mission. How concerned are you about the risk to these agents in the field right now?
Well, I think it's a complete travesty that any law enforcement officer of the United States should feel risk for their personal safety or feel the need to wear a mask to hide their identity. One thing that I'm looking at as chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate in West Virginia this year is enacting some laws that are very tough on protesters that are endangering federal law enforcement for political purposes or intentionally hindering or violating or protesting or doxing federal agents. Really, this is something that should not be happening in our society, and it's a culture on the left. It's something that we as a society have to remain adamantly opposed to. You know, I serve a God that's a God of order and authority comes from the top and there's structure, and we should be able to raise our families and walk the streets in safety. And that's what we're working towards here in West Virginia. It's a shame to see the conditions that people have to live under in some of these blue cities.
I want to ask you also about ICE expanding operations to New Orleans. Some local officials are now calling on the agency to turn over demographic data on some of the arrests that they're making. How do you anticipate ICE responding there? What are your thoughts also on this request in the first place? We have about 40 seconds left.
I mean, I think the demographic data to me is largely irrelevant. The data that matters is do you have legal status in the country? And I'll tell you who's the toughest on this is my wife. She's a legal immigrant from Macedonia. I met her on a military deployment, and she's 100% in favor of legal immigration, as am I. But if you're here illegally, that's the only statistic that matters. Are you here legally or are you here illegally? If you're here illegally, then the law applies and you're going to get deported.
Joining us now, NewsNation media contributor, executive producer of the Megyn Kelly Show, Steve Krakauer. Steve, good morning. So, the president says he wanted to break tradition, host the event, while presidents in the past have just attended, as you know, because this would lead to higher ratings. Do you believe, Steve, that was the full motivation here?
This is a guy who at one point was the host of the biggest show on television, Celebrity Apprentice, and The Apprentice before that. He's certainly a non-traditional politician, and there was reporting that several times he described it as the Trump Kennedy Center when he was making his speech or in certain interviews. I think he loves this kind of stuff. And I think it's interesting. Obviously, policy-wise, it can be very controversial. You just talk about immigration crackdown, something that is a really polarizing issue. But Donald Trump loves the arts. He's into opera and came up in New York City in the media scene there and Broadway. I mean, this is kind of part of his DNA. And so it's so interesting to see when we all watch this on CBS, if we'll see how the ratings are, you're going to see Donald Trump in the host role rather than just sort of sitting in that box like the other presidents traditionally do, maybe a little wave here and there. No, he's the one who's introducing, maybe do a little stand-up. Yeah, it's just a very, very different sort of presidency right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, as you know, too, his numbers, his polling isn't great at the moment. Do you believe he is working through events like these to move the needle in some ways? He did talk politics a bit on the red carpet there.
He did. He was asked about it. But I do think that, things like this, and if you want to think about the 2024 election and the podcast tour that he went on, the times where he moves away from politics, it does connect with people who are not overly political, people who are not big MAGA supporters and people who hate him on the left, people that are just sort of don't anchor their life around politics. It does speak to them in a different way. If you want to go and watch Sylvester Stallone get honored and see Kiss and see Gloria Gaynor, and then, oh, by the way, there's the current president hosting, you might not even know that's happening if you're just sort of a casual viewer of this and you're interested in some sort of entertainment activity 2 days before Christmas. So yes, I do think that it connects with the voter who and the average citizen who doesn't spend all day scrolling X like I do or watching a lot of cable news even. You might just sort of stumble on this and say, oh, that's interesting, and you might think about him in a different way. I do think that does have an impact.
Right. He was even talking about, which surprised me, some potential dividend checks going out to lower middle income folks all across the country, saying this isn't for the wealthy, this isn't for the rich, when he's surrounded by all these celebrities. Just interesting. Right. Kiss drummer, this was another point that sort of caught our eye. Paul Stanley, he was asked about accepting the award from the president after criticizing him after January 6th. This is what he had to say on that red carpet.
America is a wonderful country because we can all have our beliefs and we can say what we believe. And beliefs change with different situations. So what I may have said about one thing may not apply to something else.
So it was refreshing to hear somebody with an independent mindset make that case, especially in that venue. What do you attribute to the change in tune here?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The most of the people that are that we saw during the campaign. Look at the cabinet: Tulsi Gabbard, RFK. These are traditional Democrats, and so yes, I think as we cross over to the celebrity side, you don't see a lot of it now. I think maybe you did a little bit in 2024. It's getting a little bit more controversial now, but it is good to see. It is refreshing to see someone step away from politics and whoever they are, just talk about getting the honor from whoever is standing in front of your peers, because it was, also the music industry and other celebrities who were presenting the awards, who were singing in honor of them and in sort of tributes. It's good, step away from politics, even if Donald Trump is the one who obviously is the host and the president.
Right. He's pulled to meld a lot of different groups all together. Was interesting to watch. Steve Krakauer, great to see you. Thank you. Nick, the president's saying he's disappointed with Ukraine's president while he's trying to bring an end to this war in Ukraine. What are you hearing?
You're essentially saying that he doesn't believe Volodymyr Zelensky is moving fast enough. Kelly, good morning to you and everyone at home. President Trump is putting pressure on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, telling reporters that Ukraine's president isn't ready to sign the U.S.-backed peace plan because he hasn't even read it.
I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't.
Mr. Trump going on to say that Russia approves of the deal. This comes as Ukrainian delegation met with President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner in Florida over the weekend. President Zelensky said he called into those talks, and he's committed to working with the U.S. on a peace deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the next phase of the ceasefire with Hamas will start as soon as this month. Netanyahu says his country is waiting for Hamas to return the last hostage remains. The second phase calls for Israeli troops to withdraw from Gaza and a temporary Palestinian government to be formed. This comes as a senior Hamas official told the Associated Press the terror group is considering freezing their weapons supply in order to push the peace process forward. And the National Guard soldier who was shot in Washington, D.C. the day before Thanksgiving is slowly healing. That's according to West Virginia's governor. Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf's family, speaking through the governor, says he is beginning to look more like himself and that they are optimistic about his progress. Wolf, along with Sarah Beckstrom, were shot in what has been described as an ambush-style attack. Beckstrom didn't survive. The suspect, an Afghan national who once worked with the CIA, has pleaded not guilty. President Trump's power over independent federal agencies will be put to the test today. The Supreme Court will hear arguments over the firing of FTC member Rebecca Slaughter. Lawyers for the president are asking the court to overturn a 90-year-old ruling that protects independent federal agency members from being fired under certain circumstances. Slaughter argues a president can only fire an FTC commissioner only for inefficiency on the job, and she was removed without cause. And President Trump hosted the Kennedy Center Honors Sunday. Members of the rock band Kiss, actor Sylvester Stallone, singer Gloria Gaynor, and George Strait were among those honorees. Mr. Trump is the first president to host the honors after he installed himself as chairman. The annual Kennedy Center Honors celebrates on the arts and culture. The full award show will air on December 23rd. And Kelly, a new banner medallion to bring in to honor the honorees.
Oh, wow. All right. One to watch. Nick, thank you. A storm system is moving into the Pacific Northwest, and with it, the threat of heavy rain, flooding, the risk of mudslides as well. As it moves east, this could also dump a lot more snow on parts of the country. NewsNation meteorologist Max Paris, he's keeping his eye on the storm. Max, what are you seeing?
Kelly, this storm system is going to cut across the entire country, but slamming into the Pacific Northwest with widespread rainfall, triggering that landslide risk as we tap into rich tropical moisture. It's an atmospheric river storm system setup. Because of that, we have a flood watch in place for coastal Washington and Oregon, parts of Idaho as well. That will last through Friday. So we're talking all work week with a potential of flooding as parts of the Olympic and Cascade Mountains could get up to 10 inches of rain. Of course, that does cause that big landslide risk and, of course, widespread flood concerns across urban areas like in Seattle and Portland, especially those big cities getting hit with widespread rainfall. There's the clock running through Tuesday. Waves of on and off rainfall expected into Wednesday. Snow mainly north into Canada. I think we're going to be overall too warm for this to be snow in the mountains. That's why we do have that big landslide risk. This is mainly going to be a rainmaker as it tears through the Pacific Northwest into the interior of the Rockies, showing some areas getting closer to 10 inches, 2 to 4 inches through the plains there, 4 to 8 inches as we look at the Montana-Idaho border. So widespread rainmaker, of course. But as this moves into the northern U.S., outside of the Pacific Northwest, that's where we have a big snow concern. So through this upcoming week, notice we're tracking heavy snow totals for the northern Rockies, moderate snowfall as we look into the northern plains, upper Midwest, and even into the Northeast as well in the Appalachian Mountains. We're likely going to be seeing several rounds of snow this week as that system tears by. A powerful weather system that's going to be interacting with more polar air. First, the flood risk, then the heavy snow threat returning to much of the northern United States. So we got another busy week ahead here.
Yeah, even more snow. Can't believe it. All right, Max, Thank you. So today, the Indiana State Senate will begin considering a newly redrawn electoral map that aims to add 2 Republican seats. The Indiana House passed the map on Friday, but it faces an uphill battle in the state Senate. Now the White House is stepping up the pressure on those who are on the fence. Joining us now, Dr. Jennifer Hora, professor of political science and international relations at Valparaiso University. Jennifer, good morning. Looking forward to your take on all of this. It's interesting because there's reporting out now that indicates more than a dozen of Indiana's 40 Republican state senators are in opposition to this new map, and that is a significant number. Over the weekend, we heard the president urging voters to vote out lawmakers who were outright opposed. Where do you see all of this headed from here?
This is a really interesting and developing issue. Things will change throughout the day and throughout the week. So we have a situation in Indiana where we have a Republican supermajority in both our House and our Senate. We have 70 of the 100 House members, 40 of the 50 senators are Republicans. That's part of the reason that President Trump and Vice President Vance are pressuring Indiana and thinking that we can redraw our maps. We currently have 7 Republican United States House members and 2 Democrats, and they are looking to change that to 9-0.
Right. So the vice president, as you know, he visited Indiana at least twice this year. He met with the governor there, Mike Braun, as a part of this pressure campaign, I guess you could call it. But the governor is backing this new map. How much sway does he have overall in this process?
Yeah, that's another interesting part. So the governor called a special session. That's part of his constitutional power. And the House and the Senate actually decided not to have a special session. This was back in November. After that, our House and Senate members received a lot of pressure, both from the president and from the governor. They came back. What we're seeing in December of 2025, they actually decided to start our 2026 session early. Many states, like New York or Illinois, California, they have legislatures that meet 365 days a year, or at least potentially meet all year long. Indiana, we have what you call an amateur legislature. We are only supposed to meet 30 days in 2026. So here we are in December of 2025, and they are actually using up some of those 30 days that they are limited to using for 2026 on this issue.
Wow. Well, that is important context to note there. You know, we witnessed Democrats banding together to counter Republican gains in other states, namely in Texas. Do you believe the party is planning similar moves if this map in Indiana does in fact move through and it gets approved?
Yeah, definitely, we'll be sitting at 9 Republican seats for the United States House. Political scientists have models that they run on these, and we can predict safely with a 99% probability all 9 seats coming out of Indiana will go Republican if these new maps go through.
High stakes. On it, Dr. Jennifer Hora, thank you very much for weighing in. Appreciate it. Joining us now, Indiana Democratic State Representative Reagan Hatcher. Representative, thank you for your time this morning. So you have argued that this new map disenfranchises Black, brown, working class voters in Northwest Indiana. Some Republicans have countered, saying demographic shifts, especially population loss in Lake County, make this new map called for, adding that the move is legal. So what is your response to some of the pushback that you're hearing?
Right, and thank you for having me this morning, Kelly. We are looking at a real shift in the representation of the people of Northwest Indiana and Indianapolis, Indiana. These are majority communities that work very well with their Democratic congressmen. What is happening today, though, and if you put up the new map, you'll see that our new area looks quite like a salamander. It is twisting and turning around the areas that are predominantly Democrat in the state. What we're working towards is, and working on, is a fight against civil rights. And this is the areas that are so heavily minority majority that having a Republican representative just does not represent the people of those districts.
So reports are indicating now Indiana State Senate Republicans, they're not yet sold on this redistricting. We'll say that at this hour. The president's warning, though, of primary challenges of any effort, and there are quite a few. So what do you anticipate happens next year and happens today as well?
Sure, and that's a great question, because the reason that we had not gone in until December 1st was because we knew the Senate did not have the votes. The Senate came out openly, publicly saying that they did not have the votes, but there was pressure. There was pressure from the White House on the governor, on House members to convene and take this vote on the House side. They knew they had those votes. And so today, as this piece of legislation moves to the Senate, we'll see in committee today, and then we'll look to see if it comes out of committee to go to the full Senate for a vote.
If we pull back a little bit from Indiana, Republicans are arguing that Democrats have been redistricting in other states, including recently in California, that they're just trying to catch up here. So do you support moves to counter any Republican gains that are had by map changes in red states like yours?
Yeah, I think we're in a dangerous situation here. This started in Texas, and we stood, the Indiana Democrats stood with the Texas Democrats in Chicago for a press conference just to talk about the danger of moving in this direction. And so what we want to see, or what we need to see, is this country come together in a way that says that we're not going to play this tit for tat. We're not going to continue to go back and forth, because after us, who's next? Is it Illinois? What's the next state that will go through this process?
Well, and then the very next question to that is, where does all of this end? Because if it is technically legal, will both parties just be going back and forth for years on this? What are your general thoughts as to what some of the ramifications are for the moves we're seeing play out right now?
Yeah, as an attorney here in the state of Indiana, I think that there will be challenges, challenges to the process, the procedure, the way we came back in December 1st, the way we were required to have a quorum. I think we'll see those challenges in Indiana just as we're watching them in Texas. We know Texas is going to go to the full Supreme Court, probably. And so we'll be watching to see how that, what that outcome looks like, and take the same steps here in the state of Indiana.
Well, a busy day on deck. Indiana State Representative Reagan Hatcher, thank you. Well, it is a murder case that captured the nation's attention 1 year ago. The defense now pushing to keep critical evidence away from a jury as prosecutors fight to keep it in play. NewsNation's Marcus Espinoza joins us live from outside of the courthouse this morning. So, Marcus, what are we expecting at this pretrial hearing involving Luigi?
Hey, Kelly, good morning. Yeah, so Friday, a delay as Luigi was reported as sick. So that did not move forward on Friday here. So we pick up day 4 instead this morning. Things will really get going about 10 a.m. But really what's at stake here is key and is going to affect the case one way or another. And again, the defense here trying to keep out key evidence from this particular case here. Mangione's lawyers want his initial police statements and key evidence thrown out. They claim he was questioned and searched before being read his Miranda rights. Police arrested Mangione at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after a manager called 911. That call was shared in court last week. Take a listen.
Blair 911, what is the address of your emergency?
It's not really an emergency. I'm a manager at Plank Road McDonald's out here on the Boulevard.
Okay.
And I have a customer here that some other customers were suspicious of, that he looks like the CEO shooter from New York.
Okay.
So they're just really upset, and they're like coming to me, and I was like, well, I can't approach them, you know?
No, of course not.
Now imagine making that phone call. Officers say Mangione gave a fake name and a false ID. Investigators searched his backpack, finding a journal with alleged writings about his dislike of the insurance system, ammunition, a 9mm ghost gun they believe was used in the shooting. Prosecutors revealed new evidence over the weekend that included a USB necklace, black gloves, a medical mask, and thousands of dollars in cash, some of which was foreign currency. Now the judge gets to decide what gets thrown out. The next federal hearing is for early next month, Kelly.
All right, Marcus, so realistically, what are the thoughts on how much of this evidence could actually get thrown out?
Yeah, that's the big question here, and it's not expected to be the entire thing, the entire bag that the defense is asking for to get thrown out and police statements. Really the expectation here, after we spoke with a lawyer and a legal expert about what to expect does get kept and what gets thrown out, is basically minimal. Take a listen to this.
You can still search someone because you're protecting yourself as a police officer. There's the inevitable discovery exception, which means they would have been able to search that backpack because they were going to make an arrest for the fake ID and then ultimately for the murder.
So that's a key argument there. And then also worth noting here is the amount of witnesses that have been brought up here, and dozens more are still expected. Quite a bit for a pretrial hearing, but certainly this is not your average case. If you would ask anybody on a grand scheme all morning and update you as we get them, Kelly.
All right, we'll be checking back in. It has been extensive. Marcus, thank you. Luigi Mangione expected back in the courtroom this morning. He was too sick on Friday to show up. Prosecutors, they're working to prove that key evidence in this case was lawfully obtained. And one of the next witnesses is apparently the officer who searched that backpack. So what are you going to be listening for? As you know, the defense wants the contents of this backpack tossed.
So important, right? What was the reason to search that backpack? Remember, police can't just search any backpack. They can't search any property of anybody. There has to be either reasonable suspicion, warrant, or it has to be incidental to an arrest. So it's going to be very important that I want to hear is how soon after, was that alleged fake ID given? When was it run? When did they have an understanding that it was fake? What was said? And what was the concern about the backpack? Now, you'll have defense attorneys who will say, if he wasn't reaching for the backpack. It wasn't in his near view. This idea that perhaps there was some sort of explosive device in there. Well, he was accused of shooting someone in New York, not planting bombs. So you're going to hear defense attorneys say there was no justification for law enforcement to search that backpack. Now, if this person testifies and says, well, listen, we think he's the shooter. We're worried there might be weapons on him. We believe he handed over a fake ID. It's incidental to the arrest. It was at the same time. We had every right to do this. We tried, that's the winning argument here. And by the way, for big picture, why this is so important, in the defense's best world, imagine a trial where the gun doesn't come in, where the suppressor doesn't come in, where the magazines don't come in, where the writings don't come in. That would be a big win for the defense. So a lot of this is going to be very key today based on this officer's testimony.
Right. And many weighing in say, they're shooting for the stars because of what you just outlined there, that this would be just a huge advance for their case. Are there arguments you've heard thus far, Jesse, from the defense that you believe would warrant any of this evidence being thrown out in this case? And if so, what have they been?
Look, it's not great they didn't read him his Miranda rights for 20 minutes. It's not great. Now, they will say, well, he wasn't in custody, right? You only have to read somebody their Miranda rights if they're actually in custody. Counter argument to that was he surrounded by officers? Did he really have an opportunity to leave? There was testimony last week that he said, I don't really want to talk, and yet an officer kept on talking to him. So it does become a question whether any of those initial statements he made to that officer as they were checking him out, as they were running that ID, would that not be allowed in? It's possible. Now, even if those statements weren't allowed in, I don't think that's going to end the prosecution's case. It does come down to the backpack. And remember, we played the 911 phone call. There is an argument that officers had reasonable suspicion here. There was a call where people thought that he looked like him. You look at the clothing that he was wearing, arguably matches up to the clothing of the suspect in those surveillance footage, in that surveillance photos, those images, and also the fake ID. Why did he allegedly have a fake ID? So I think the winning argument may be for the prosecution, but having said that, it is a problem that they didn't read his Miranda rights for 20 minutes.
What are your thoughts on the officer's testimony? The officer who said, the second he pulled that face mask down, I knew this was our guy. How significant do you believe that statement was?
I think that's a big statement because remember, the suspect, the alleged defendant, wasn't always wearing the mask. Remember the key photo from the hostel where the mask was taken down? That was a photo that was circulated across the country, which is, by the way, there was a lot of testimony so far about how these images were circulated, how widespread, who saw them. That image of the suspect taking down the mask at the hostel, I think that could be a winning argument as well. Remember, you have to put yourself in the position of the officers at that time. Right. If they had a reasonable suspicion that this was the shooter, reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, that is going to be an advantage to them. That's going to be an advantage to the prosecution.
Wow, it's been fascinating to watch this. NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Good seeing you.
Great to see you.
All right, for more, we are joined by renowned criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos. And of course, you'll remember he has represented so many major figures in court, including the Menendez brothers, Mike Tyson, Michael Jackson, Colin Kaepernick, Hunter Biden, previously Sean Diddy Combs. The list goes on. So, Mark, so good to have you with us. I'm so interested in your take on this very high-profile case because we see the sticking point of this initial search of Mangione. The defense argues that this happened without a warrant, before he was read his rights, that it was 20 minutes of questioning before he was informed of that right to remain silent. How crucial are those 20 minutes?
Very crucial. And by the way, you're for NewsNation, and I would agree with her. In almost every case, you would say to yourself, all of this stuff is clearly coming in and the defense is going through the motions. This may be the one exception, even though it is extremely high profile. And the reason is you in your package had that 911 call. The 911 operator kind of chuckled as she says it's not really an emergency. So one of the reasons that there have been so many witnesses called, and I don't know if it was mentioned, but there have been, and there are at least 20 some odd witnesses that are scheduled to testify, people inside of the place where he was detained and later arrested, body cam video showing what was going on, and all kinds of other indicia that there was not an emergency here. If that's the case, the fact that the backpack was searched, there was no emergency without a search warrant. If this were a lesser high profile case, I would tell you that it was touch and go as to whether the prosecution could make their compelling argument to his honor, because this really is not what's called an exigent circumstances search. They have a real hard time telling the judge they needed to do it. They couldn't have gotten a warrant.
Wow. I mean, so those officers went through the backpack that Mangione had with him. They found that 9mm handgun. They say that matched the weapon that was used in the murder. They found a notebook detailing his alleged intentions, his writings filled with disdain for health insurers. Is this evidence at risk of being thrown out entirely, in your opinion? And do you think that's going to have a major impact on this case?
Normally, I would tell you the mother of the judge hasn't been born that was going to throw this evidence out. However, in this case, it's pretty hard to get around some of the in real time evidence that this was not an emergency, that this was not a situation that they had to act without a warrant. I mean, they took their time. They are obviously, I think, going to testify, they being law enforcement, that they didn't want to, that there were people there. They were worried about the safety of the others there, and I can understand that. But at the same time, clearly, this did not rise to the level of an emergency situation. If it isn't an emergency situation, that's why we have the Fourth Amendment, right against search and seizures that are unlawful. There was no search warrant. Yes, if this evidence is excluded, that is a very, very damaging ruling for the prosecution. Let me play out one more thing. For your listeners, if they're wondering, there is both a state doctrine here, meaning a state prosecution. You're showing a picture of Karen Agnifilo with Luigi there. And there's a federal prosecution. The standards are different and the state of the law is different under New York state law versus the federal in terms of inevitable discovery. One of the things that the prosecution has kind of argued is a first cousin of inevitable. Namely, they would have gotten it anyway. That, as I understand it under New York law, is not going to fly. So that really does, for the prosecutors, one of the reasons they're really throwing everything at this motion is that it's a make or break motion for them.
Absolutely.
Well, it is pretty automatic for most drivers. You see a school bus with its stop sign extended and you stop your car so that students can get off safely. But not to mention also it's the law. Some cities say Waymo's robo-taxis, though, they're blowing through those stop arm signals and they're putting children's lives at risk. So after our Nexstar investigation, Waymo has said it fixed the issue, but the city of Austin, Texas says the violations continue. NewsNation's Xavier Walton, he joins us now from Dallas. So Xavier, the company says they've made the software changes, but many aren't convinced this is enough. What are you learning?
Kelly, good morning. Yeah, that's exactly right. You know what? This story is sort of taken on a life of its own. Waymo hitting the brakes after school bus safety concerns coming to light, like you just mentioned. Thankfully, you know, nobody was hurt, but still parents say, hey, this is a major red flag. This is a major issue that should really be addressed, and that's what Waymo is hoping to do here. Their latest statement coming out now that they're issuing a voluntary recall, rolling out a software update saying in it that it wants to do better and meet the highest safety standards. So in Austin, Texas, you kind of went over this, Kelly, but school bus cameras caught Waymo's driverless cars illegally passing buses while the stop arms were out. The district says, you know, that's happened at least 19 times this school year that they could count. In one video from last month, cameras captured a Waymo stop briefly and then move forward while a student was still crossing the road. The bus's stop arms were out the whole time.
There are other districts that are being potentially impacted by these operations as well. We want to be very vigilant about it.
So he wants to be vigilant, but so do parents and children as well. Waymo says, these incidents really do make up just a tiny fraction of the overall incidents that happen around the school district. But the company is planning to expand, should mention, in other major cities in Texas, such as, Dallas, where we are, Houston, also San Antonio.
Yeah, and, at the same time, Xavier, Waymo, these school buses, these issues, they're not just happening in Texas. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, it's gotten involved, too.
They have, yeah. NHTSA is what most people call it. But they are expanding its review, not just here in Texas, but also in other states, such as Georgia, where there have been eerily similar incidents reported. And then also, caught on camera, Atlanta Public Schools say that it recorded at least 6 bus stop arm violations between May to December. One of these incidents is now under investigation after a Waymo vehicle reportedly didn't fully stop for a bus with its red lights flashing and stop arm extended nationwide. NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, says it's reviewing nearly 700 Waymo-related incidents since January. Now, Waymo mainly operates in California, Arizona, and here in Texas, with Georgia as a bit of an outlier, kind of a testing ground. But, Kelly, as Waymo expands, school bus safety will certainly be at the forefront and under a microscope for sure, especially for parents.
Yeah, you can understand why. All right, Xavier, thank you.
We are joined by the man himself, Ross Coulthart, a NewsNation special correspondent, investigative reporter, host of the Reality Check podcast. Ross, always so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Let's start with that conversation with Congressman Tim Burchett. He spoke about the possibility of 5 to 6 underwater alien bases. How did he come by this information? How legitimate do you believe these claims could be? Is there any evidence that corroborates this?
Well, it's a funny game we're all playing, really, isn't it, Natasha? Because we've got this funny game at the moment where the Pentagon categorically denies any knowledge of extraterrestrial engagement with this planet. Yet there are congressmen like Tim Burchett who are clearly very well informed from some of their private committee hearings, and I suspect that's what's informing him. He's also been speaking to a lot of the people I've been speaking to who are confidential military and intelligence sources who are telling him, myself and others, that there are non-human intelligences engaging with this planet, and moreover, they're taking a very close interest in the military facilities that we have in the United States, particularly nuclear weapons. And I think that's why there's a lot of activity off California, because there's an enormous number of aerospace companies, and of course inland we have Area 51, the full Nevada test range. So I don't think it's any surprise. A lot of people might think it sounds crazy, but frankly, inside Congress now, a lot of people like Representative Burchett are hearing things in closed committee that can't be discussed publicly. And I think the government, the Trump administration, really has a bit of a weight on its shoulders to make a decision at some stage soon about whether it's going to come clean.
Wow. So, the congressman mentioned he's hoping for a one-on-one with President Trump about UFOs. Do you anticipate anything coming from that conversation? Are you surprised that there hasn't been more released since he took office?
Look, we've actually seen, I think, since 2017, since the big New York Times revelations about a secret UFO investigation in the Pentagon, we've actually seen quite a lot of information come out. We've had congressional hearings. I think for the glacial pace we see of any reform and any policy change in Washington, what we're seeing with UAPs is actually happening pretty fast. I do think the Trump administration's taking the issue seriously. I don't think they're involved in any active cover-up. I think they've been distracted by the Middle East, the economy and the war in the Middle East, particularly, and Ukraine. But I think there are people in the administration now who are turning their attention to the UAP subject. This is the biggest story in human history. I know it's true, and a lot of people in the administration know it's true, including, I note, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, acting National Security Advisor. There are people now in the administration at FBI, Director of National Intelligence level, who are taking this issue very seriously indeed, and they are moving behind the scenes.
Okay. Your special also features a boat captain who says he's experienced multiple UAP sightings. He took this video, I want to pull it up here, showing mysterious orbs in a triangular pattern that stayed up in the air for about 10 minutes. He was also a witness to an underwater event. I want to take a quick listen to that together.
Basically. And somewhere's along the line, we drove over something. I have no idea what it could have been, but as we drove over it for those few moments, it flashed lights up at us. Like, I'm talking like, it looked like baseball stadium lights just surrounding the boat, just beaming up all around us. Sat there the rest of the night with a gun in my hand, waiting for something to come creeping out of the water. I was that scared.
Wow.
Like, I don't get scared easy, but that was it was a moment.
Yeah, gun in his hand. It was a fascinating account. Also, total aside, his dog is the cutest, most zenned out dog I've ever seen in my life. But what stands out to you about this account, about this particular witness, about this sighting?
These orange orbs are very common. There are literally hundreds of sightings of orbs in and around Catalina Island particularly. And more importantly, as we showed in the show, there are weird electromagnetic anomalies happening. Often aeroplanes lose their ADS-B readout. There's something going on in that area. It's very deep, extremely deep, and the US Navy, of course, has facilities very close by. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the US government knows full well what's going on there, and I suspect it's not human.
2822 News Midday starts right now.
Good Monday morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us. I'm Tom Williams. We're going to head right to the forecast today because temperatures are really going to take a dip tonight. Let's check in with meteorologist Logan Westrop on the roof. He has the very latest. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Tom. Yeah, it's certainly a cold start this morning, but still not as bad as what we're going to see compared to this time tomorrow.